Hello and welcome to this ISM Trust webinar on advocating for music in schools. I'm Ruth McPherson, Head of Charity Development at the ISM. To describe myself, I'm a white woman with mid-length brown hair, and I'm wearing a blue and white jumper, and the ISM Trust logo is behind me. I'm delighted to be joined on this webinar by the ISM's Research Associate, Dr. Jodie Underhill, and also by Jenetta Hurst, a music educator with 15 years experience. Jodie leads on research in key policy areas which feed into the ISM's vital campaigning and lobbying work. She holds a PhD in psychology from Keele University, where her research focused on musical culture and participation within different school settings. Jodie is a qualified music teacher with over 18 years of experience, and she's worked as a head of music, head of drama, and head of performing arts. And she's taught across all key stages in both the state and independent sectors, as well as weekend performing arts schools. Jodie has run her own private teaching business, in addition to having been an examiner for both GCSE music and A-level drama. And she's the current chair of Bryson Young People Centre in Cheltenham. We also have joining us Jenetta Hurst, who has worked as a middle and senior leader in a range of school settings in the Midlands and in London, and she sits on the board of Lambeth Sounds. Jen's work within secondary schools has allowed her to plan and deliver the curriculum at Key Stage 3, 4 and 5 in music, and working with children aged 11 to 18. She's also worked alongside colleagues from across the disciplines in the arts. As a former assessor and quality nominee for Pearson's BTEC qualification, Jen has worked closely on assessment, quality and standards of work samples. She's the founder of the Creative Educator, a space that brings together educators and arts practitioners to share strategies and resources for embedding creativity in the curriculum and to celebrate its impact on all learners. So before we begin the webinar, I just have a few points of housekeeping. During the presentation, please do feel free to ask questions using the Q&A function, and we'll do our best to answer these at the end. And do keep an eye on the chat box, where we'll be dropping in some useful links as we go. If you experience any technical difficulties, let us know in the chat box and we'll attempt to resolve them. And if you wish to use them, subtitles are available to enable at the bottom of your screen. The webinar is being recorded, and we will share the recording with you afterwards, as well as a feedback survey, which we'd be very grateful if you'd fill out. The ISM Trust is the sister charity of the Independent Society of Musicians, and the Trust offers high-quality professional development to everyone working in music, the majority of which is free to access. Through the ISM Trust, the ISM gives back to the music sector and supports and empowers music professionals to succeed in their careers. We produce award-winning events, training and resources, which, as I said, are largely completely free to access. Please do consider supporting the work of the ISM Trust by becoming a friend, making a donation, or leaving a legacy. Any support that you can offer is much appreciated. Now, without any further ado, I'm very pleased to hand over to Jodie, who is going to tell us about advocacy and how to make the case for music in your schools and communities. So thank you, and over to you, Jodie.
Thank you, Ruth. So while I'm just setting up my screen sharing, I will let you know that I'm a white woman with short brown hair, and I'm wearing black framed glasses and a navy blue jumper. So the ISM's advocacy guide started life a number of years ago as a campaign toolkit for Back for the Future, which specifically encouraged people to write to their local MP raising concerns over arts in schools. Our education reports from 2022 highlighted how music provision varied across England, with a large number of teachers feeling that music was under or devalued in their schools, that they had insufficient funding and a lack of support. We wanted to create a resource that could help them make the case for music in their schools and beyond. Before we look specifically at advocacy, I'd like us to first think about how music and the arts fit within the culture of a school. Much of what we understand about school culture is based on the work of Terence Deal. His definition of culture as the way we do things around here is often quoted by researchers. Although simplistic in nature, it captures the essence of organisations, including schools, and what makes them unique. Deal went on to explain this phrase in more detail. It consists of patterns of thought, behaviour, and artefacts that symbolise and give meaning to the workplace. Meaning derives from the elements of culture, shared values and beliefs, heroes and heroines, ritual and ceremony, stories, and an informal network of cultural players. Erickson explains this in relation to schools. When you walk into a school, you may get a global impression of the school's distinctive tone or character. What cues led to that impression? The walls and their decorations, the floors and the way they're polished, the demeanour of students and staff walking through the halls, the nature of the instruction that takes place in classrooms, the relationships between staff and administration. Corbett says something similar. School culture can be felt in the general atmosphere of the building, in the way people speak to each other, what is visible and valued, where images and artefacts are placed, and how the school projects itself. Schools are more than bricks and mortar, pupils and teachers. They're not islands. They're inevitably affected by the community around them, by local and national government policies, and by the backgrounds and values of pupils and teachers alike. Prosser considered 4 types of culture in relation to schools. The wider culture, so the local and national cultures embedded within schools. Generic culture, the similarities between schools in terms of their structures and traditions. Unique culture, the differences between schools. And the perceived culture, so the view of the outsider, whether that's a visitor or the local community. Nind et al. Referred to the layers of school culture, the official culture, the school culture, classroom culture, playground culture, and subcultures related to class, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, and so on. These types or layers of school culture may be a useful way for you to evaluate how music is presented, valued, and visible within your own settings. If you're keen to develop an arts-rich culture, what might this look like? In 2019, the Royal Shakespeare Company was commissioned by Arts Council England to undertake a national research study into arts and cultural education in Ofsted-rated outstanding schools. They wanted to understand why and how outstanding schools integrate arts and cultural education as part of a rigorous academic curriculum. And this is what they found. The strength of commitment to the arts had either been initiated or inherited by school leaders. Many were deeply committed to the principles of a broad and balanced curriculum, with the arts commanding equal status and respect with other subjects. All the schools had arts specialists, champions, and/or arts leads. Many SLT and teachers described school cultures of risk-taking, can-do attitudes, and entrepreneurialism with no fear of blame. The schools were open to opportunities. They gave prominence to arts and cultural learning through a range of events and were a key platform for schools to celebrate achievements, engage with prospective children and young people, parents, staff, and the wider community. There was a shared language around the value of the arts. There was recognition of the time commitment required to ensure and maintain quality arts experiences. Schools typically enjoyed relationships with artists and arts organisations and had strong relationships with other schools. There was often a specific governor for arts and cultural learning and/or a link governor. In some cases, they had professional backgrounds in the arts. Arts and cultural learning were strong elements of the curriculum. In primary and within special schools, there were examples of the arts being taught discreetly, as well as being integrated in the teaching of other subjects. In secondary, schools were designing arts provision around the needs and interests of children and young people, as well as enabling them to take 2 arts GCSEs if they wanted to. There were strong arts enrichment and extracurricular opportunities. And in most schools, although not all, parents were highly supportive of schools' arts and cultural learning offer. A number of these schools use their arts provision as vehicles for parental engagement, providing opportunities for schools to build relationships with parents, showcase children and young people's work, and challenge parental aspirations. So what is advocacy? There are probably very few head teachers who wouldn't want the arts to be part of their curriculum offer or the wider life of their school, but there are often conflicting pressures on them in terms of timetabling, staffing, and funding. Advocacy can be used to raise awareness of a particular issue, create support for policy or policy amendment, and encourage people to look for further information. Increasing knowledge and awareness can help to shape beliefs, attitudes, and behaviours. Advocacy activities may include letter writing, media campaigns, research, and demonstrations. Lobbying is a type of advocacy where the aim is to influence the policies and decisions of government. In schools, advocacy may be as simple as talking to relevant parties about the importance of music education and the impact it could have on your pupils, or as complex as trying to increase the number of hours for music on the timetable or the amount of money your department receives. And why should you advocate for music in schools? For those working in music education, the answer to this question may seem obvious. There is a wealth of research showing the benefits of music education, drawn from the fields of neuroscience, psychology, education, and music. For example, Susan Hallam's book, The Power of Music. These include how music contributes to a range of non-musical skills, such as language, literacy, and spatial skills, and how it can be a positive way to re-engage disaffected young people and enhance self-beliefs. Music also has beneficial effects on physical health and well-being, although there is limited evidence on its impact on physical development. In addition to these direct benefits for children and young people, the arts also play a major role in the UK economy, with the creative industries contributing £109 billion in 2022. Employers also need workers with creative skills, and business leaders have called for a curriculum which fosters these and broadens horizons rather than narrowing them. The devastating impact of school accountability measures in England cannot be underestimated. They have devalued arts and technology subjects in our secondary schools. GCSE music entries fell 37.5% between 2015 and 2023, while A-level music entries fell 27% in the same period. In 2022, 3 in 5 teaching hours in secondary schools were for EBAC subjects. However, changing the culture of a school and the beliefs of governors, senior leaders, parents, and pupils can be a long process, even with the most enthusiastic and supportive school partners. Advocating for music can help reverse the downward trend in schools and encourage them to invest in arts, culture, and creativity. Reasons to advocate for music in schools may include raising the profile and value of the subject, increasing understanding, dispelling myths or misunderstandings, affecting cultural change, and influencing policy at all levels, including government. There are a range of people that you can advocate to, depending on which issues you feel need addressing and what your priorities are. You may not have considered reaching out to your local borough or county councillors or members of parliament before, but if you don't share your concerns, decision makers have no way of knowing this is important to voters. When advocating at the school level, there'll be a range of issues that are personal to you, your pupils, and your school's circumstances. It may be that your primary school currently doesn't offer much music and you want to get it added to the curriculum. It could be that your Key Stage 3 lessons are taught in a carousel system and you want to reverse this. Perhaps you need more resources or equipment or a space for peripatetic teachers to offer instrumental lessons. You might need more access to technology or CPD in a specific area, or there may be issues surrounding whole school policies. Whatever you're asking for, you need a clear vision. What is it that you want? What do you need in order to get it? And how will this impact your pupils, the school, or the community? Make sure you have clear asks, messaging, and outcomes, as well as evidence to support them. So now we'll move on to some ideas for advocating for music in schools. It's worth pointing out that these are not just my ideas, but have been collated from a range of teachers' experiences. Be the best role models for music you can be. Support your pupils' interests, widen their opportunities, celebrate their successes, and help them to progress to the next stage of their journey. Personalise your asks and impacts to your school and your pupils. Involve your pupils. Let them share what music means to them. In secondary schools, you could consider having arts ambassadors or prefects. My last school had performing arts prefects from the end of year 10 going into year 11, and they helped with practice rooms, concerts, open evenings, and transition days. Their badges were given out in house assemblies and they became role models to younger pupils. Link back to your school development or improvement plan, if possible. Provide solutions wherever you can. For example, if you're asking to take subjects off a carousel or to introduce them to the timetable, can you suggest where the extra time needed comes from? Become visible. If you have school or department social media, you can share research and articles which promote the importance of music, as well as classroom and extracurricular updates. Depending on your school's policy, you may be able to share videos of rehearsals, performances, or trips. Use your displays to promote careers information, share successes of former pupils, or information on famous people who studied music but didn't necessarily pursue it as a profession. For example, Keir Starmer's played the piano, recorder, flute and violin when he was young, and attended the Guildhall School of Music up to the age of 18. And King Charles III played the cello in his university orchestra, but also learned the trumpet and piano as a child. Create a department newsletter or use a section in whole school newsletters just for music updates. Offer performances or activities for open evenings, transition days, induction days, and make them practical wherever possible. Offer whole school music activities, for example, a house or year singing competition. Share performances or big news with local press. Often, if you write the article yourself and submit it with photos, you'll find it appears. Invite your local councillors or even MP to events. Share your pupils' work with SLT and governors, show them recordings, invite them to lessons where pupils will be performing or creating, and to exam performances and whole school shows. Build the department from the ground up. A great curriculum and great extracurricular activities will lead to increased engagement and demand. Build a coalition in and out of school. These could be non-teaching staff like teaching assistants or site managers, other subject staff, governors, parent-teacher associations, community organisations, feeder primaries or local secondaries. Invite staff to get involved in choir or ensembles or help with shows. At my last school, the orchestra had a librarian pianist, a maths teacher violinist, and a TA clarinetist. The art and DT department helped create sets and props for the school show. One of the caretakers did sound and lighting, and staff from English, maths and history played some of the adult roles. There was also a team of volunteers from across all departments who would offer to supervise pupils backstage before a concert or a show. Now, this didn't happen overnight, but sometimes all it took was that initial approach. So don't be afraid to ask, especially if you're in a single person department. It also became the norm for pupils to see those teachers outside of their usual subject area involved in creative activities. And finally, take advantage of external opportunities and local events. For example, could your choir sing at a local care home at Christmas? Could your school or parent-teacher association fund participation in something like Young Voices? Does your local music hub or music service have open access opportunities like massed choirs? Or do local theatres, orchestras or music venues offer free or discounted outreach workshops? Before I move on to the evidence base, I'm going to take a quick detour to look at how we might encourage more uptake of music exam courses. We've seen the impact in England of accountability measures on art subjects. While these external factors undoubtedly put pressure on schools to steer their pupils in a specific direction and prioritise some subjects over others, what action can be taken both in and out of schools to make a change? For teachers and subject leaders, early engagement is vital, especially when even a full hour lesson a week of music over an academic year equates to less than a typical adult's working week. Curriculum time is often limited as to what you can include, even more so if your school operates a carousel system. Consider drawing parallels between the work pupils do lower down the school and what they can expect to do at GCSE or National 5 level vocational equivalents. Encourage your pupils early and look for excuses to be enthusiastic about your subject. My own research highlighted the importance of the parental message in relation to school music. I was particularly interested in the interplay between the pupil, the school, and the parents, and found that the views at home, whether positive or negative, had strong influence on pupils. My findings suggested that if the parental view of music at school was negative, then the child's view would also be negative, and this could affect pupils' engagement with school music, the value they placed on music as a school subject, and the decision to continue music education as an exam subject. Parents may not have experienced a rich music curriculum themselves at school, or may have had negative experiences, and so may not fully understand what the curriculum offers. I've encountered many parents in my career who equated music or drama lessons while trying to make their child a professional actor or musician without fully appreciating the wide range of skills that can be acquired, as well as a range of creative and non-creative professions that could be pursued. There may also be some myth busting needed. For example, it's still possible to find schools referencing Russell Group facilitating subjects in their GCSE options literature, despite this being withdrawn in 2019 and replaced by the Informed Choices website. Language around subjects is important. If we divide subjects into different categories such as core or academic, the message we risk sending is that some subjects are less important than others. The ISM's 2022 report, Music, a Subject in Peril, found that teachers felt strongly that accountability measures had devalued music as a subject, particularly among parents, who often saw music as a hobby to be continued outside of formal education. The effect of creating subject hierarchies often trickled down into perceptions at Key Stage 3. There are a variety of different arts qualifications now on offer at both 14 and 16. It may be that vocational courses are more suited to your students or offer them different pathways into arts professions. Schools should also think carefully about setting minimum numbers in order for a particular course to run, which may also place restrictions on art subjects. In England, the Ofsted Research Review for Music noted that the average number of pupils taking A-level music nationally is only around 1 or 2 per school. So a class size of 5 would actually be more than double the average. They state that it may be helpful for senior leadership teams to know this context and to plan for the likely small class sizes at Key Stage 5. There's a range of evidence and research which can be used to help make the case for investing in music education. England and Wales both have national plans for music education, and there's also a cultural education plan on the way in England, although no date has been given for its publication. Ofsted research reviews and subject reports also outline what high quality education might look like, and often highlight improvements which can be made at leadership level as well as within the classroom. There are also annual reports from His Majesty's Chief Inspector, which for more than 20 years have reported a narrowing of the curriculum in Year 6 as a result of SATs, and in Key Stage 3 as a result of carousels or extended Key Stage 4. Similar inspection reports exist in the devolved nations, although they are not necessarily as up to date, and of course the issues surrounding SATs, the EBAC and Progress 8 are specific to England. Parliamentary reports from the House of Lords and Select Committees, for example. Most recently, the House of Lords Committee on Education for 11 to 16-year-olds raised concerns around the narrowing of the curriculum, and the House of Lords Communications and Digital Committee have examined the impact of this on creative skills. Organisations such as the Office of National Statistics provide data on the value of arts and culture to the economy. Exam boards often have their own resources. For example, Educas have a series of option evening materials with leaflets which outline how different GCSE and A-level subjects can help young people's future plans, the skills they will gain, and potential progression routes. The ISM's joint Save Our Subjects campaign has collated reports from across the arts and technology sectors. It includes research from universities, learning societies, subject associations, exam boards, parliamentary committees, and think tanks. And you can find out more at saveoursubjects.org. Figures for national exam data can be found on the Joint Council for Qualifications and Scottish Qualifications Authority websites. Ofqual also have an analytics page for results in England, which are broken down geographically. And finally, internal data. Can you demonstrate the impact on pupils by using your own school level data? For example, do you think that what you're asking for will improve attendance, behaviour, attainment, and can you evidence this? Pupil voice can also be a powerful tool. And thinking about writing to your local councillor or MP, you can get in touch with your local borough, city, or county councillor and MP to tell them why music and the arts in schools really matter. By writing a letter in support of the arts in schools, you could make a real difference. You may even be able to make your case in person at your MP's regular surgery. Even though local authorities have much less control over individual school budgets than they have had historically, they still have the power to ask questions and to influence. They also do still have funding and policy within their control. You can find out who your local representatives are at writetothem.com. When writing, make sure to include your contact details and postcode so they know you're a constituent. Introduce yourself and the organisation you work for or with. Tell them why music in schools should be protected in your community and give practical, tangible examples of where music in schools has enhanced your community. Describe any decline of music in schools that you have seen and why any further cuts in your local area would have a negative effect. Be as specific as you possibly can. Use evidence to make a broad argument, showing the national decline in the value of the arts and cultural learning. Invite them to come and see your work in practice or ask if you can meet with them in person. It's best if you make the letter as personal as possible, but you can use the template in our guide if you need any inspiration. We hope that the advocacy guide can help teachers champion music by helping them to raise awareness of a particular issue, encouraging decision makers to look for further information, and providing suggestions as to how they can raise the profile of music in their schools. And now I'm going to hand over to Jen.
Good evening, everybody. Hopefully you can all hear me. It's a pleasure to be here. I will start by audio describing myself. So I'm a black female with braided dark brown hair. I'm wearing black glasses and I'm in a white room, which is an office space. So there's various office equipment dotted around. So I'm going to ask for the slides to be shared, please. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to be talking to you about advocating for music in schools in practice, I suppose, in terms of some of the fantastic things I've had the privilege of doing over the years in my work in various schools that I've worked in. My background in music education has been broad and varied, but one thing that has been consistent across all of the schools that I've worked in is that a varied curriculum and co-curricular offer is key to bringing the best out of all students musically and creatively. If we could move to the next slide, please. So I've listed several ways in which I've advocated for music in the schools that I've worked in over the years. And I'm going to start with staffing. So I will say one of the most important things is to make sure that staffing is correct in terms of the numbers of staff in the team. So if you're leading the team, you've got to look at practically what can be achieved if you're a single person department. And I'm sure there are some people on screen today who are joining us who are in single person teams. And I started out like that myself. And my first example of advocating was to request just a part-time member of staff, and the impact of having just a part-time member of staff. And I think we had 4 visiting teachers, instrumental teachers that we invited to join the department. The amount that I could achieve with the young people was completely different with a little bit of additional support. So advocate for the correct number of staff members. And I think staff, in sticking with that, is really important to ensure that your staff are skilled and suitably skilled. And that may mean having a TLR payment, a teaching and learning payment, for those members of staff, that though they may not be leading the team, they are going to bring vital skills that may be a different skill set to that which you hold. Their skills need to be varied as well, and we always want to be meeting the needs of the young people that we're working with. I will come back to staffing and talking about technicians shortly, but before that, number 2, music technology. Make sure your technology works, and I'm sure some people are smiling on the other side of the screen. There's nothing worse than asking for money for technology in your department to find that it can't connect smoothly with the school network. And I think you may need to knock on some doors. You might hear me say that a few times in this session, but you may need to knock on some doors. But really, really important is to make sure that technology is working. There's no point in making that investment for it not to work in practice. And get the support and the technical expertise that you need. So in some schools I've worked in, we've fielded that out to specialist external organisations that can support us remotely. Sometimes it's been dealt with in school, but making sure that you've put together a good bid for what technology you need. Also reminding your school leaders that there will need to be some updates over the years. You can't get a suite of computers and hope that they're going to stay working as they did on day one after 5 or 7 years. So there's an investment there. And I think I'll come further down the road in this session to kind of showing impact. But just remember, I'll just say briefly now that a huge part of advocacy is showing the impact of those investments. So if you make the investment in technology, expect that you're going to need to show an impact in that investment that's been made. In terms of just sticking with staffing and technology and combining the two, I think in 2023, not having a great technician in your team is, a misstep. I have become a far greater music technician over the years, but I definitely didn't feel like one at the start. And I think it's really important to value a technician for the skills that they can bring. So really advocate for having, even if it's a part-time technician, they'll soon become full-time once the school can see the value of that technician that you've brought on board, and find, advertise nationally, get a good person in to support you with that. And they can run music technology clubs at lunchtime, after school, and of course, importantly, support with that Key Stage 4 and Key Stage 5 coursework. Talking about working in partnerships, if anybody saw the little video that I recorded a couple of days ago for the ISM, just to promote this session, I would say that working in partnerships and working effectively in partnerships has been one of the greatest privileges of the work that I've done over the near 20 years. It's actually 18 years now completed doing this work in music education, and a couple of years before that as an instrumental teacher myself, before working as a school-based teacher. And I think that working in partnership with the best people is a great way to advocate for music, and there are many ways that you can do that. So if I go back to the early days of working in schools, we used to work with organisations in Birmingham such as Sound It Out Birmingham. They were, I believe, Sound It Out were a charity, which meant that we didn't have to find a great deal of funding to bring them in. We worked as part of the first national plan for music education, because we're on the second one now. And as part of the first one, many schools across Birmingham were able to come and work with a practitioner and then bring a piece of music to the launch event. Obviously, things like this, getting your students out into the community, into wonderful performance venues, it's great for recruitment for the school. It's great for getting the students out into the community, which just allows them to see professional music spaces and professional musicians. Also, all of the myriad jobs that go around delivery of music in a venue. So all of the technicians, all of the front of house staff, caterers, all sorts of people. It gets them to see what it is like to be in a music venue. And talking about careers is one of those things that is so important in terms of keeping music going throughout the life of your time in school, and from students from year 7, if you're in secondary 7 through to 11 or through to 13. If you talk about careers, students are going to see that there's a value, and parents are going to see that there's an added value. We know there's value in what we do, but they're going to see there's an added value in what we offer. Gospel projects, things like the gospel project that we used to run in Birmingham, we used to be a part of that, and working with community orchestras. So, working not only within the school, but working out in the local community and bringing those practitioners in is a great way to keep music at the forefront of the life of your school. Working in partnership in terms of, I think, just school-based sessions, a great example of that, a more recent example that I will just share, is some work that we did in a school in London, in Brixton, with Trinity Laban Conservatoire of Music and Dance. And that, for the students, I'm going to be honest and say, for the students that I was working with in that particular academy, I think going to a music conservatoire, a London-based music conservatoire that's ultimately on their doorstep, that is not a place that many of those students and their families would have frequented before being introduced to it, and introducing them to things like an A-level music, of a kind of a long-distance A-level music opportunity, if we couldn't offer that in the department because we couldn't necessarily fund it. Introducing them to junior conservatoires, raising the bar, having them sit side by side with conservatoire students so they can see and raise their aspirations and think about what could be possible for them. I think opening those doors and broadening horizons is a huge, important part of advocacy, and it was a privilege to be able to do that, fully funded by fundraising that Trinity Laban had done. So look out for those opportunities, but I suppose I'm here to talk a little bit about how to make that happen. And the important thing is to go out and talk to people about what you need, because there are pots of money around. We may have limits to the money that we have available to us in school, but organisations do their own fundraising. You can do things like match funding. Go and talk to people, knock on doors, and find out what it is that they can support you with, and how you can partner up and pair up to provide your young people the best opportunities. Just going back to technology, talking about software, I think there's loads of online free software that you can use. So make sure that you research. There's things like BandLab. There's things that come standard on Macs like GarageBand, but then there are also those other sort of next step up pieces of software such as Logic, or some people still like Cubase. I think software is something you're going to have to bid for again, and it's something that you're going to have to show impact on. And the best way to do this, I'll jump down to number 7, is to think about your curriculum. So the curriculum offer at Key Stage 3 does need to be broad and balanced, and thinking a little bit about Ofsted, which is something that people don't like to necessarily talk about, but it's something that has a huge role to play in terms of advocacy, because if you can share with your leadership team that you're thinking about government guidance and direction such as the National Plan for Music Education, you can think about accountability such as Ofsted, accountability measures such as Ofsted, then that's going to prick the ear of your senior leaders. And I think thinking about your curriculum intent and taking that off of the page is a huge part of advocacy. So not curriculum intent because we've, Ofsted say and the senior leaders say we've got to put on our website what our curriculum intent is, not because of that, but because your curriculum intent, if you sit down with your team and you sit down and you think about what is it that we really want these children to experience over 5 or 7 years, or in primary, what do we want them to experience through Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2, and what do we want them to leave with, and actually how do we want to create lifelong musicians. I think your curriculum intent then becomes the heart of your department. It really should be at the heart of your curriculum planning. But your curriculum is not only at Key Stage 3, we want to see good, strong results at Key Stage 4 and hopefully Key Stage 5 as well. And we know, as Jodie mentioned, there are always declining numbers in music, but there are great schools which I tend to try and find myself in and position myself in, that continue to really care about music and really ensure that we can continue to offer the subjects even if the numbers are not the highest, okay? But in terms of advocacy, one of the first things that I will do when joining a department is direct my focus to Key Stage 4 music. What offer do we provide to the children? Is there a vocational offer? Irrespective of what the offer is, how are we going to work together as a team to ensure that we are achieving some results? Because I can guarantee you that once you can present a good set of results, funding is going to become far less of an issue. If your senior team can see that there's benefit to the young people, if they can see that there's a love of music, a passion for the arts, that you've got some great dedicated staff, and combined with all of that, you can get some great results, they're going to be willing to fund you. I've never found that I've had the door closed in terms of asking for funding once I've shared that, we can achieve these grades. So I think it's something that in your planning, going back to the Key Stage 3, talking to your primary feeder schools, if you're a secondary leader here or a secondary teacher here, talk to your primary schools, find out what they're doing, your feeder schools, and start to think about a long-term curriculum plan so that you can show that impact. Another thing quickly, because time is going, is just in terms of curricula, the wider curricula. So obviously you've got your co-curricular or extracurricular offer, but something that we did in Joe Richardson Community School that I worked in a few years ago was we ran a Year 9 curriculum day. And this was an opportunity to work with fantastic practitioners who came in just for 2 days. Organisations like Beat Goes On with Ollie Tunma, the creative director at the Lion King came in and did some African dance and drumming with our students. Nav Arles did a vocal musical theatre workshop with us. Just a fantastic couple of days of taking the children off of curriculum and putting them into musical activities for 2 days. And obviously the love of that will come from that will therefore increase your numbers, raise your uptake in year 10, and make music a subject of choice. We want to keep music in its rightful place on the curriculum at Key Stage 4. So that's what all of this is really about. I would like to go to my next slide, please. Thank you. Just in terms then of engaging with best practice, I think networking is hugely important. So connect with your music education hub. Jodie mentioned this before. Connect with your local music education hub and your music service, because it is a transactional thing. There are things that they're going to be able to offer that are outside of your specialism. We almost become generalists as music teachers, don't we? Because we have to be able to do a little bit of everything. But there are people out there who are highly skilled and highly qualified to be able to offer something that may not be our strong point. So talk to your music education hubs. Get involved with other musicians. Some local authorities still have subject networks, and there's something called the Music Teachers Choir, which I've just joined, and that's something that's, just for my professional development, and it's something that allows me to network with other teachers in a social setting, develop my skills and bring the learning back into school to work with our choirs in school. So look out there for great opportunities. In terms of webinars, I think we all saw the value of webinars during the pandemic. And we all felt quite isolated, I think, many of us felt quite isolated for a time. And I would say the balance has probably tilted back now a few years post-pandemic. But do get out there and skill yourself up and still connect with others, and you will feel a renewed sense of inspiration to go and take ideas back into your department. There are organisations such as Sound Connections who are always running great offers in terms of webinars. ISM, obviously, Every Copy Counts is an organisation. You can look them up. I won't spend time talking about them now, but there's some work there that we do around composing and licensing, and how composers, again, link into careers, how composers get paid. Conferences, Music Mark Conference, the Music and Drama Education Expo, and national campaigns such as I'm In, anything run by Music Masters, anything run by Music Mark. Get involved in these national campaigns, because you will have ideas, practical ideas that you can then take back in and start to implement with your teams. But make time as well. I will just mention, actually, it's almost my time, I think, but I will just mention the value of meeting together as a team, even if you're a small team, and even if you only get to do it once a month, or if you get to do it bi-weekly or weekly. Sit down with other people so that you're not just looking at problems, but you're able to start to find solutions as well, and gain from each other. Have a talking shop, have a planning session, sit down and think, what can we do for our department? May I go to my next slide, please? Okay, so big questions. What do you want to see in your school setting and your music department? These are some things that you need to think about for yourself. How can you work with others to make this happen? And what will your measure of impact and success look like? I think we did skip a slide there, but it's fine. We can either go back in a moment, but I just will, thank you very much. I will just keep those questions, maybe take a screenshot of or a photograph of those big questions. I wanted to end with the big questions, but I want you to take away, after I've gone over the final slide, I want you to take these questions away and think about them for yourself in terms of finding ways forward. These are some things that you need to think about. But if you go back to the previous slide, please, just a few things in terms of building on what Jodie had shared, which was a really comprehensive list of ways that you can advocate in practice. Student voice. When we did the work with Trinity Laban, the voice of the students was so important. We hear about student voice all the time, but actually hearing what the students want, that helped us to build a 3-year program with Trinity Laban that would actually meet the needs of students. So one thing that we knew, for example, is that we would do a great deal of work in school, but our students wouldn't go home and practice, either because there wasn't space in the home for, a trumpet to be practiced when there's a baby in the flat as well, or because, it just wasn't seen as something that was hugely important. So we started a practice club, but only through talking to the children did we realise that there was a need for something such as a practice club. The staff, we were always busy, so it took I think we had some graduate musicians that would come in and run the practice club. So talk to your students and hear periodically what it is that they want from you. In terms of impact, you need to be thinking about showing this and linking, Jodie mentioned this, to your school development plan, but also with the new national plan, there's the school music development plan. And I know that I can say this, it's about a year into this process now, and I don't believe that tons and tons of music leads are really thinking about this document. I don't personally believe that. I haven't heard many people talking about it, other than knowing that it probably needs to be done. I would say it's really important to ensure that you are thinking about your school music development plan and thinking about how you link then to organisations that surround you, and really what your offer is going to look like in school, and share that with your senior leaders. And the aim there, if you haven't looked at it for a while, is to enable all children and young people to learn to sing, play an instrument and create music together, and have the opportunity to progress their musical interests, including professionally, which is why I love to talk about careers. So that phrase that comes from the National Plan for Music Education, I can't imagine there's anybody that's joining us today that doesn't have that at the heart of what they're trying to achieve. So do think about your school music development plan. Talk to your senior leaders, talk to your line managers, ask for what you need, but tie it all into your school documentation and rate your progress, and show impact, show how the things that you've asked for, when they've been implemented, show the impact on the students and their families. I've spoken about linking with your music education hub, and Jodie gave you several examples of how you might fundraise. So do think about fundraising through various events. It looks different in different schools. We have, in the current school I'm in, we have a really strong parent association, the Friends of our school, who are at every single event, including our open evening, providing refreshments and all the rest of it, but then also at our musical, out at the summer, providing mocktails and all sorts of things. All of these things help to raise funds for our department. So there's a lot that you can do, but please do keep your school music development plan at the heart of your thinking. Get it off the page. Think about your curriculum intent, get it off the page, make it practical, and connect and partner with great organisations. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jodie and Jen, for those presentations. They were really comprehensive and loads of great ideas there that hopefully people can take away and put into practice in their own schools and communities. So now we're going to go into the Q&A section of this webinar, and we've had a few questions submitted in advance, and we've also had one on the Q&A live, which is great, thank you. And please do keep asking questions, because we've got about 10-15 minutes to go through those. So if you have a question, please pop it in the Q&A and we'll try and get through as many as possible. So first of all, somebody has asked, how do we ensure that when we're advocating for music, we make it truly accessible and inclusive every time, emphasising individual and societal wins? Who would like to answer that one? Jodie, can I ask you? Yeah, thanks.
I think a lot of it does come back to student voice. As Jen said, that's when you really get to the heart of things. That one of the reasons that I became interested in this relationship between parents, school, and child was because I started my career at a time where instrumental lessons were free, and pupils were really excited to start their lessons. They would go home with their instrument and they'd return the next day and say, I'm not allowed to play it, it's too noisy, there's too much going on, I don't want to carry it on the bus. And that really kind of opened my eyes to the situation of pupils outside of schools, and that it wasn't just as simple as kind of having free lessons and free instruments. There were lots of other things at play. So I think really getting an understanding of what is happening in your pupils' lives and what support they need, and what you need in your department to support them in turn is really important.
Thank you. Anything to add, Jen?
Yes, I do. Of course I have something to add. I would say thinking about EDI links, equity, diversity and inclusion links. It has to be, as I've said, about getting things off the page. It has to be more than a tick box exercise. So if you're thinking about female composers, highlighting female composers as an example, or highlighting composers of colour, or thinking about the fact that you've got students with special educational needs and disabilities, actually being brave and researching accessible instruments, thinking about what's actually out there, looking at the open orchestra. There are so many great examples of good practice out there now. So you may have to do a little bit of research, but there are sort of like models out there now that you can look at and learn from and replicate. Nate Holder's resources, I will always be a great advocate for Nate's work. His books, his posters, I had them up in my last school. I'm not currently working as a head of department. I'm working as a senior leader at the moment. But when I was last working as a head of department, his posters were up. And it just, when parents come walking through for an open evening, they can just see, okay, hold on, something different is going on in this school. Also, key dates. So there are all sorts of days, aren't there, throughout the year that schools highlight. Thinking about those dates that link with the schools, the word that I want is like the PSHE offer. That is going to appeal hugely to your senior teams and to your pastoral leaders. So putting on a week of music for Black History Month is a great example, or having a calendar of music for the 30 or 31 days of October. Things like that, and having your QR codes up in your department so people can go up and they can scan. If it's a school that allows phones, there's not many of those anymore, but having QR codes that people can go around on open evening and scan, and just show that you're thinking about being in 2023, being up on technology, and also thinking about being really inclusive, but inclusive in practice, not just saying we look at reggae, we look at Bob Marley and one key stage 3 scheme of work. I mean, that's old practice. We need to be thinking about doing this across the board, so that you're revisiting and coming and building on skills. You know, you might look at reggae in year 7, and then you might need to look at calypso and mento, and then you might need to look at how that links to a modern artist like Laura Mvula and the great contemporary music that she's made. So thinking about revisiting, I could talk for ages, but that's my answer on that question.
Thank you. Those are both great answers. Thank you very much. So moving on to finances, how do we advocate for music education in schools when local music hubs feel underfunded and schools are struggling financially? I know you touched on this, Jen, but anything further to say on that?
I'll go first this time. My answer on that one is quite short, in that I would just say, I guess, I've experienced all sorts of things. Independent schools where money is not an issue, multi-academy trust where the money is centralised, so you're likely to get a budget and maybe even have a central music team that can offer what you can't in your specific academy afford to offer. But recently, in a school that I was in, we actually did charge the parents for instrumental lessons, and that was probably the first school that I've worked in that did that. And I think even if it's a token, even if it's a small amount that the parents are paid, it's heavily subsidised. For me, I think that's a really important thing in terms of commitment, because what you don't want to be doing is spending money and the children are not really taking it seriously and they're not continuing with it. So I think we are at a stage where, although things are tight for everyone, even asking for a contribution is probably a necessary idea in many schools, I would say.
Okay, thank you. And leading on from that, somebody asked, how do I make a school understand that £8.50 per hour, an £8.50 per hour room hire fee is a massive unfair barrier to music lessons? I know this has been an issue for teachers. Jodie, do you have anything to say on that one?
Yeah, so it's something that we look at in our annual fee survey, and something that we've been tracking. And actually in the Case for Change report, there's a small section on room rental and admin fees. And we have seen an increase in schools charging room rental since 2018, which does it was about 16% of respondents were being charged. And then in 2021, that had gone up to 21.5%. and those fees do vary quite a lot between respondents. It seems to be something that independent schools do quite a lot when they're trying to show that a teacher is self-employed, but it's not actually necessary to do that, to charge people. I'd say one of the first things to do is actually determine your status. And obviously our legal team can help with that if you're a member, because there are obviously different regulations and situations depending on whether you're actually truly self-employed or whether you're classed as a worker. I think it's a really difficult one because you could pass that on to the parents, but then you risk kind of outpricing them and risking people's then missing out and not being able to afford those lessons. So it is a really tricky one. I would use some of the evidence that's out there, things like the Child Poverty Action Group and their cost of the school day report from 2022. There's quite a lot of heartbreaking data in there about the impact of things like instrumental lessons and the charges that parents are really struggling to pay, to the point that some pupils aren't even taking letters home. They're leaving them in their bags, not showing them to parents because they know that they just can't afford it. The other thing I would maybe suggest, if there's more than one peripatetic in the department, if you've got a range of instruments and teachers there, can you work together collaboratively to go forward with a proposition to explain what impact this is having? Because I think there's strength in numbers, but I would really recommend, if you remember, getting in touch with our legal team to determine status and whether there's a way around that.
Great, thank you. And do you think there's merit in focusing resources around advocacy on engaging and educating parents and carers to become stronger advocates for music? Jen, you're smiling.
Because I think the work that I did with Aston Performing Arts Academy was very much about parents as well as young people. Many of the parents made music with us. So they'd come along and they'd come to the performances and they'd play their maracas or they'd play a drum, and or some of them were really highly skilled instrumentalists or vocalists. And I think it's so important to involve parents in the music making process, and particularly to get marginalized groups or groups that wouldn't necessarily go into some of our really rich cultural spaces in the country, get them into those venues. So you're advocating for it by putting on an event in a venue they wouldn't normally go to, and helping them to understand that these are spaces that exist for everybody. So I would say absolutely get the parents on board and get the parents almost doing the promotion work for you just from the experiences. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And then what do you think that independent and freelance instrumental music teachers can do to advocate for music education in schools? So those not employed by or linked with a music hub specifically, this person was asking about.
Jodie, you go ahead, I'll go off.
Okay. I was going to say, I think you've got to identify what it is that you want to advocate for first and foremost. It's a slightly trickier position I think you're in if you're not part of that school setting or part of that hub setting. It can feel that you're kind of out there on your own. But again, there will be other peripatetics to collaborate with. I think it's raising the profile of what you do. I know some peripatetics go into assemblies and kind of give demonstrations of what their lessons involve and what pupils are learning as a way to encourage uptake. But I think that's also a really great way of advocating for not only music, but your instrument as well, and what is on offer. And I think particularly if you've got a portfolio musician where teaching is a small part of what they do, actually bringing in their other experiences, whether that's playing for an orchestra or whatever it may be outside of teaching, and to really share those wider experiences with pupils as well. Absolutely.
Okay, I'm afraid that's all we've got time.
Are we done? Okay.
No, go for it. Yeah, we've got time.
It's only very, very brief. My battery's about to die. Quick, plug myself in. It was only a quick one on that fantastic question about freelancers. And I'm not saying that people should work for free. I'm not suggesting that at all, but connecting particularly, I think, with primary schools who often have that situation where they have nobody who's the music specialist, or just a single teacher who's a music specialist. They will always be glad of an offer of support. I think targeting marginalised groups such as children from refugee backgrounds, disadvantaged children, communities who may not typically be exposed to certain genres or styles, communicate and reach out to those groups. And I think once schools, like I said earlier, once schools see the impact and the joy that comes, they will want to have that repeated year on year on year. I'm not saying that people should go out and work for free. I'm really not advocating for that. But what I am saying is connect. You'll be surprised how many people really want that skill set, but they don't know you're there. So freelance musicians, let them know that you're there.
Great. Thank you. I'm afraid we're going to have to end there, but it just leaves me to say thank you very much to both Jodie and Jenetta for that extremely helpful overview of music advocacy in schools. I hope you've come away with lots of hints and tips as to how you can advocate for music in your schools and communities. And thank you very much to all of you for joining us. I hope you found the session informative and useful. If you have any further questions, please do email us on inquiries@ismtrust.org, and we will try and respond to them or forward them on to the appropriate person. Please also fill in our post-webinar survey, which you can find in the chat, and it will be emailed out to you as well. We really appreciate your feedback. It helps us to improve our services and to offer more free professional development. So if you have ideas about things that you'd like us to do, please do let us know. And the webinar recording will be sent out to you by email, and it will be available to watch back on our website. And we'll also be sending you some useful links that we've shared during this webinar, plus some information about how you can register for our upcoming webinars and workshops. So that includes our next webinar on tax for musicians on the 22nd of November. Then on the 7th of December, we have a workshop on building a successful freelance music business. And then on the 17th of January, a workshop on synthesis in music production. So hope to see some of you at some of those future events. And just finally to say that we've recently launched the latest ISM Teachers Fees Survey, which Jodie mentioned earlier. So if you're an instrumental or a vocal teacher, please do fill out the ISM Teachers Fees Survey, which helps us to create a really valuable benchmarking tool for thousands of music teachers. And do also share that with your musician friends and colleagues. It just helps. The more people who fill it out, the more helpful the resource will be. So finally, it just leaves me to say thank you very much again for watching. Thanks to Jodie and Jen, and we hope to see you at another ISM Trust event soon. Thank you. Goodbye.